All right. Well, welcome everyone to tonight's Meet the Author at Reformers Bookshop. My name's Tom. This is Mark Jones. Mark is pastor at Faith Vancouver Church in Canada. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks. Great to be here.
If you don't know about Reformers Bookshop, Reformers Bookshop is a Christian bookshop in Sydney. We are very careful about what we stock, so we review everything that comes into our range, and so everything in our range is reformed and evangelical. It's reliable. That's what we like to think. Now, Mark has written a number of books. We just asked him before. His favourite is Knowing Christ. It's about Christ and knowing Him.
Yeah.
He's also written some Christian pocket guides. We'll talk a bit more about Knowing Christ in a second. Some Christian pocket guides, which are also excellent, and a devotional on God's attributes called God Is. Now, Mark, can you tell us a bit about why you wrote Knowing Christ?
Yeah, well, I had done a PhD on Thomas Goodwin and published an academic book that's over $100 on Amazon. So no one's reading it. And I felt like I got all of this key knowledge that took a lot of effort from the Puritans. And then as a pastor, you're preaching on Christ every week. And I thought, I've got all of this stuff that I was able to learn, and I want people to be able to know this. So as a pastor and as someone with a little bit of scholarly experience, I thought, how can I wed these two together and give a book to the church that will lead them to love Christ more? And when I approached Banner, they said, well, Mark, books on our Lord don't sell very well. And I said, well, I'm going to write it, so do you want it? And they said, sure. And I proved them wrong. My mom bought at least 10 copies.
I think it's on its third reprint.
Yeah, third printing,
yeah.
Maybe more. I don't know. Again, my mom, she's very generous.
Well, no, I think when we put out the news that you were coming here, we got immediate feedback from people on how it's affected their life and been a real help. So
yeah, it's in a few languages as well. It's in Chinese, it's in Korean, it's in Portuguese, French, and I can't read any of those. Well, French a little bit, but it's just so exciting to go around different places and people will bring up Knowing Christ, and so yeah, it was certainly worth the effort. Wonderful.
And who you mentioned you were writing it as a pastor thinking. So were you writing it for the everyday person?
Yeah, I mean, it's been surprising how many pastors have said they've learned a lot. I mean, I remember John MacArthur said, I learned a great deal from that book. I thought, well, that's good to know. But, it was designed for the average Christian layperson. But to test them a little, I knew it would require probably a little more effort than maybe a typical a book. So it was written with that incentive to kind of push them a little, but I still think it's within the range of the average layperson.
Yeah, because there is quite a bit of Puritan theology that comes into it, isn't it? So
yeah, Puritan theology for dummies.
Yeah.
We have those books in America, Chemistry for Dummies and all of that. So I'm trying to take Puritan thought and make it more accessible with my own sort of thinking over the years on Christ and stuff. So how do I, put this out there where it's sort of the Puritans, but it's not going to, terrify people.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the Puritans tend to terrify people.
They do.
So after they've read Knowing Christ and got an introduction to them, what's a good intro book into the Puritans?
An intro book into the Puritans, so like in terms of actual Puritan writing?
Yeah, an actual Puritan writing.
I think Thomas Watson, you definitely feel like he's the sort of John Calvin of the 17th century in the sense of how clear he is. You just read him and there's no problem. So I'd say Watson on the Body of Divinity. If you wanted to have like systematic theology, the Lord's Prayer, the Ten Commandments, those are good books. I think John Flavel is probably the next sort of step. And if you're feeling really adventurous, Thomas Goodwin and Stephen Charnock, and then for that lonely person who has nothing to do all day and has heaps of time on their hands, they could crack John Owen open and see what happens.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I hear good things. We talked to Kelly Kapic a couple of weeks ago, and
good.
and he raves about Owen.
Yeah, he should. Yeah, and he would know. So
yeah, that's very helpful. And perhaps another question on the books that the Puritans have written. What's your favourite one?
Favorite? I think Thomas Goodwin's "The Heart of Christ in Heaven Towards Sinners on Earth" was formative. It was one of the first ones for me. John Owen, I read Mortification of Sin, because when you become a Christian and you learn about the Puritans, you sort of are duty bound to read Mortification of Sin, and that's a wild ride through like Puritan sanctification, and will never forget Romans 8:13. As long as I live, that verse is etched upon my spiritual DNA because of Owen. 80 plus pages of just Romans 8:13 coming at you in small print. So that was really influential. Probably the one book I would take to a desert island. I know you didn't ask that question, but I'll preempt it, because that's what we do in America about the desert island.
We're on a desert island, so...
Oh, yeah, I forgot. That's why I was thinking about that. Yeah. Stephen Charnock's The Existence and Attributes of God is the one where I think, wow, this is a gold mine of untapped... and he has a way of words and turn of phrase that is unmatched by, I think, any Puritan. And that's actually going to be coming out by Crossway in the next few years. I'm editing that 2 volumes, making it easy to understand as far as we're able, headings and updating and all the work. So that'll be out in a couple of years.
And another thing you're working on, I believe, is the Prayers of the Lord?
That one is actually, that's finished. It's just up to Crossway now to put it out February next year, the Prayers of Jesus, and that's looking at his prayer life, and really a bit of a companion to knowing Christ. I thought, the more you read and learn, the more you kind of understand some of the issues. And I think maybe a lot of books on prayer are very much directed to the believer and how to pray better and all that, and there's some good ones, but this one's sort of taking you away from that guilty feeling that I don't pray enough, to looking upon how Jesus prayed, why he prayed, and what he prayed for. And maybe that will be a sort of way to help people with their prayer life, rather than the sort of more direct hit of E.M. Bounds style. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Very good. Well, I think we'll end it there. And
Great.
So thank you very much for your time. If you're watching online, be sure to pick up a copy of Knowing Christ, and keep an eye out for the Prayers of Jesus coming out next year.
Yeah, thanks.
Mark.
Thanks, cheers.